Welcome to the Productivity Show podcast, where we believe that you can get the important things done without having to sacrifice your health, family, and things that matter to you. My name is Tam Pham. I'm the founder and CEO of Asian Efficiency, where we help people become more productive at work and in life. And today, I'm joined by Alice Ferris. She's the founding partner of Goalbusters Consulting, where she helps small to medium-sized organizations in the nonprofit sector with fundraising. She has more than 30 years of professional fundraising experience. And a fun fact about her is that she's the 90th fundraising professional in the world to earn the Advanced Certified Fundraising Executive credential. Alice is recognized for her on-air presence on many public television and radio pledge drives and fundraising national PBS pledge programs, among them Ken Burns' America's Storyteller, Downton Abbey, The Civil War, and Financial Solutions for You with Suze Orman, among many others. She's also an Asian Efficiency client who is part of the Productivity Academy and has joined many of our programs. So I'm really excited to chat with her today. Welcome, Alice.
Thank you, Tan. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know you've been with us for a while. I know you're an avid listener of the Productivity Show. So we always like to start off with our top 3 favorite resources. And since you are the guest of honor, I'm going to hand it over to you. What are the top 3 things that you want to share with everyone?
Well, I have to admit that I edited my 3 things because there were far too many things that were things that you or Brooks have recommended. And I just, couldn't be that much of a fangirl. But I have 3 things that I winnowed it down to. And my first thing is Active Inbox. Now, Active Inbox is this add-on to Gmail, and I think it's an add-on for Outlook as well, where you can apply GTD principles to your inbox. So you can code things by a date, you can code things for action or follow-up. I actually have a category in Active Inbox that I've labeled my most important task. So if I have stuff that I want to have as part of my MITs for that day, I'll flag it. And then the nice thing about it is that I can assign a date to an email and it just kind of pops up on that particular day. So that's very useful that I use a lot. My second thing is the Loom Cube Edge desk lamp. And I'm actually using it right now for the Zoom call that I'm on with you. And it is by Loom Cube, which first started coming out with these lights that became very popular at the beginning of the pandemic to provide lighting for your Zoom calls or for your other video calls. And I switched to their LCD panel for a while, and then they came out with this really beautiful desk lamp that has a soft light to it, and you can move it around so that it provides lighting for your calls as well as lighting for your tasks. So I really like the Loom Cube Edge. And my third recommendation is, I will admit, something I learned from you and Brooks, and that's the clipboard history. And this is where you can turn it on in Windows. I think there's a function on Mac as well, where you can clip a whole bunch of different things and then go back and then paste them selectively. So I use this every single day, all the time. So I'll go into something and I'll copy a whole bunch of different things and then be able to paste them into different sections of a form. And it has saved my life many times.
Yeah, amazing. I know that's kind of a hidden setting in Windows. And if you're a Mac user, there's like other programs that kind of have that, but also if you use something like Alfred or Launchbar, it will have it included, but there's no default setting for that. So if you are a Windows listener, be sure to Google it because it's a hidden setting that you want to check out and something we teach in one of our courses. But we'll make sure to link to everything else that Alan's mentioned here in the show notes as well, so you won't miss a beat. And Alice, I'm kind of curious. I know you've been with us for a few years, and most people come to us because they struggle with time management, with productivity. They want to be more effective. But I actually don't know your story. Like, what got you started with coming to us or just learning about productivity in general?
I believe I was first introduced to Asian Efficiency looking at your blog. And I'm pretty sure what I Googled first was inbox zero. And I was trying all sorts of different things to manage my email at the time and probably getting a little bit overwhelmed by the number of different tools that people were throwing out there. Here's how you clear out your email. Here's how you control your email. Here's how you do this. And I'm pretty sure that the first course that I signed up for Asian Efficiency was related to the concept of managing your inbox. And I remember it being really affordable, and I remember it being incredibly practical. And I also had to laugh because of the name of the company, because I am Asian, I'm a Taiwanese American, and to be subscribing to a platform called Asian Efficiency was kind of a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, I thought it was also a memorable name, so that's why we always stuck with it. And you mentioned inbox zero, so I'm guessing you maybe heard that term elsewhere before you searched it. Do you remember where that came from?
I think I was first starting out with GTD, Getting Things Done by David Allen. And the whole idea of managing not just your email inbox, but just all of your different inboxes is so prevalent in the GTD model that I really said, yeah, that's going to be something that makes my life easier. And I decided that I was going to double down on that piece. And so I was looking for as many different tools as I could. And that's when I came across Agent Efficiency.
So when you tried GTD and then clearing your inbox, I'm sure you've come across many methodologies and tips and strategies like you've mentioned. What are some things that you have tried that totally failed?
Well, one thing that I have continued to struggle with actually is having a email system that is for email. So it's not necessarily a holding place. And then having a separate system to file information where you want to find it. And then having another way to kind of keep track of actions. And one of my challenges is trying to keep things in the system that I've created for it. So like taking emails and moving them into my task management system is one of those pieces that never has quite stuck for me. And so what I end up doing is tagging things for later action with a date or something so that I can take action on it. Because when I tried to be really strict with myself and say, okay, it has to go into the task management system, it has to go into this other thing, I would get stressed out by the number of things that I had to keep track of in terms of, oh my gosh, how many steps do I have to process this particular email? I'm freaking out. I'm just going to leave it there. So I'm trying to be more proactive about that. But I've also decided that I kind of need to give myself a little grace and say that even though it's not perfect, it's done. In fact, I have that on my computer bezel where it says done is better than perfect. And so that's one of those things that I've had to do. The other thing about all the various email management systems is that I've really had to give some thought to how much inbound email that I have, because I'm terrible about signing up for email newsletters. I sign up for like everything. And oh, that sounds interesting. I'll sign up for that. I'll sign up for that. I'll sign up for that. And then like on a quarterly basis, I get overwhelmed and end up having to pause and say, no, Alice, maybe you should unsubscribe to a lot of stuff that you just keep deleting and you're just not reading. So I think I'm periodically, like every quarter, really good about unsubscribing to emails and preventing stuff from coming in the first place. But for the most part, I'm kind of bad about stemming the flow, the inbound flow, so to speak.
So how much time are you spending on email every single day?
Now, that's something that has been transformational. I used to spend hours on email, and I've never really quantified it, but it was really, I would think like the first 2 hours of my day just processing email. And now I'm far better at it. I mean, now I think I take about 15 to 20 minutes first thing in the morning to do the first kind of clear out, because there's less coming in, which is nice. And I'm also faster in that 15 to 20 minutes of getting rid of stuff, like the David Allen Getting Things Done rule, the 2-minute rule. I'm pretty good about the 2-minute rule. If this is something that I can just deal with right now in 2 minutes, it gets dealt with. And so usually I take about 15 to 20 minutes first thing in the morning to process email. And that's back to the things that didn't work for me. I know we're supposed to eat our frogs. I know we're supposed to do the big thing first thing in the morning and when your energy is up and all this stuff. But I just can't do that. That's like jumping in the deep end for me. I kind of need to wade in a little bit. And so I do check my email first thing in the morning, but I'm not spending hours on it. I'm just doing is anything on fire? What do I need to triage? Okay, now I can get into the major projects, because I think if I didn't check my email, I'd be like really paranoid that I was missing something. So that piece didn't work for me, but being able to kind of ease into it. My friend Chad likes to call it eating some tadpoles before you get to your frog. So that's what I do. I eat some tadpoles.
I love that, because if there's one thing anyone that's listening to this right now that they should take away from this section is there's no one size fits all, right? There are some good practices that are out there, and there's some recommendations that we have as well. And one of them is something like eating your frog, like doing the hardest thing first thing in the morning. And we've also learned that doesn't work for everyone, right? It works great for me. It works great for Brooks. It works great for many of other of our clients. But you discovered that it didn't work for you, but you flipped it around and said, hey, you know what? I'm going to eat some tadpoles first, and then I'm going to get to the thing that's really important to me.
Mm-hmm. And it has definitely been, in many respects, liberating for me, because there would be those days where I kind of got down on myself because, oh, you're not eating your frog right now. You're dealing with a lot of little things. But I really do feel like if I kind of it's almost like a warm up before an exercise, before a workout. This is my warm up to get some of these other things checked off the list so that I can feel like, oh, see, you're checking things off the list. You're being productive. And then I can tackle the big thing.
I'm glad that you said that you're spending less time on email, because I find that most people can spend easily 3, 4, 5 hours a day. And that doesn't just include time at work, but also time at home, time outside of the office, maybe on the weekends even. And it's such a time suck that doesn't have to be there. And what's kind of unfortunate is that most people just don't know how to manage the email more effectively. And there's fortunately more education on this topic, and I'm glad you're able to learn some of that stuff as well. What are some other email tips or strategies that you would share with other people listening?
I think related to my email, one of the things that I've had to be more disciplined about is this really an action that needs to be put on my action list? Because my company, Goalbusters Consulting, we have a team of 10 people, and we are distributed across mostly North America, but we do have one associate that's in the Netherlands. And we all work independently, and we all have our specialty areas. So there are times when I think, is this something really that needs to go on my action list, or can it go on someone else's action list? And that has also helped with managing my email, because if it's something that can go on someone else's action list, then it just gets forwarded to that person with like 1 or 2 sentences of instructions, and it's taken care of, and it's kind of out of my mind and off of my list. And the nice thing about that is, because it's gone off onto someone else's list, then I don't have the boomerang email coming back to me. And so that reduces my volume. But also related to that, one of the things that we did at our last company retreat was I rolled out, inspired by Asian efficiency, actually, I rolled out a communications protocol. In fact, I think I got the template from Marmel. And I said, here's the tools we are going to use to communicate, because all of us nowadays have so many different channels to be able to communicate with one another. And my thing that I told our team was, if it's something that involves an outside client, so if it ends up going outside of our group, then email can be involved, because we may have to forward a document to a client, or we may need a thread where a bunch of people who aren't part of our company are part of that thread. So then we can use email. But I said, if it's a task or action, it has to go into the task management system. If it's something that just needs a quick answer and it's not synchronous, so it can be answered whenever, but it's not necessarily something that needs a really long explanation, put it in Slack. If it's something that you just need to walk through with someone, set up a call. And using the Asian efficiency communications protocol as our template, we rolled this out last year. And it has dramatically reduced the amount of email that goes back and forth amongst our team internally. And I figure if we can just reduce the amount of email that we're generating internally, then we're only focusing on the external emails. So that has been a huge lifesaver. And it took a while. I will say it's probably been about 5 or 6 months since we rolled that out. And people are really finally in the rhythm of okay, I know this goes to Slack. Oh, yes, I know this goes to the test management system.
Wow, that's amazing. I had no idea that you implemented that, because I know
it was wonderful.
It's one of the few things we've taught at, like, maybe it was a Dojo Lifetime session, because I don't remember teaching that in one of the courses, but I think we shared how we do things behind the scenes. Yeah, I think that's what it was. So for everyone that's listening, if you ever want to know how we do things behind the scenes, or want to have additional extra content that's not really for public, we only do them every now and then for our Lifetime members. And one of the things that we were, I guess, displaying in there, which I think it's been a while, it was the communication protocol. It's just the idea that something that I've always been a big fan of, which you just mentioned too, is no internal emails whatsoever. So since day one, I've been a big fan of just no internal emails. If someone needed to reach someone else, back then we used HipChat, which is now Slack. If you wanted to get some faster reply, you would call them or text them. So everyone in our company has each other's phone numbers. And so I know if someone's calling or texting me, it's going to be very urgent. But if it's not urgent, you can just quote unquote hip chat me back in the day, now in Slack, or just leave a comment somewhere in Jira, which is the platform that we use for our task management. And then you can expect a response usually within 24 hours. And that's always very realistic. So even internal communication never happens through email. We have Confluence, which is kind of like our platform for meeting notes, documentation, SOPs, and everything. And all my announcements that I make to everyone company-wide is also in there as well. So yeah, I barely send emails internally, and I'm glad you were able to take that on as well, because it saves so much time. And like you mentioned, because you don't use email for internal stuff, now anytime you're dealing with email, it's really important because it's related to your clients.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. I'm kind of curious, as someone who is not really familiar with fundraising, I imagine you're working with a lot of stakeholders. You work with a lot of organizations. There's probably a lot of communication, such as email. What does a typical day look like for you?
I think one of the things I like about being a consultant is that there mostly aren't typical days. And I would say that pre-pandemic, my days were a little bit more erratic schedule-wise. And since the pandemic, it has been a little bit more consistent. But for the most part, we have a stable of clients that we work with that are based throughout the entire North America, mostly in the US right now. And I meet with a few of our clients that are on an ongoing retainer basis much more frequently than others. So usually I have a daily meeting that I have with one of our clients. I have a couple clients that I meet with on a weekly basis. And I try to keep most of the standing meetings are consolidated to Mondays and Fridays, so that I can fill up those days with the ones that I know are recurring meetings. And that way I know to avoid scheduling things on those dates if I have unique or out of the ordinary things on a given week. And then that gives me a little flex time between Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to be able to plan those one-time things for specific clients, or be able to have some actual work time to be able to focus on some of the things I need to accomplish for the clients, or to maybe goof off a little in the middle of the week just for fun. And one of the things that I also noticed is that because of just who I am, and I did the Clifton Strengths from Gallup many, many years ago, back when it was Strengths Quest for Students was, I believe, the first time I took it. And one of my top strength, which has come up pretty much every time I've taken the assessment, is achiever, which is that type of person who loves to check things off a list and who is constantly focused on working. And so as much as I would like to say that, oh, I always take such and such day off, I actually work a little bit every day. And it's not because I feel obligated to do it. It's because I enjoy it. It's part of what I do and part of what my passion is. So I'm typically spending on a weekday, usually a meeting in the morning, and perhaps on Mondays and Fridays, meetings much longer into the day. And then Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, I try to work in at least a couple hours of focus time on each one of those days to work on a specific project. And that's one thing that I've become much more disciplined about over the years, is that it used to be, okay, I have this time to work. And I didn't plan ahead what I was going to work on. And now I'm looking at it once a week saying, okay, what are the things that absolutely need to get done this week? And where can I carve out at least a couple hours to work on each one of these things? And then those are the things that I slot into my calendar on usually Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. The other thing that I try to do on a daily basis is one of the things that we talk about a lot in the Productivity Academy is the morning ritual. And so I do have my morning ritual, and I put it on my calendar. And in fact, I have 3 other people who have direct access to my calendar. And one of them has been relatively new to our team. And when she first started looking at my calendar, she was overwhelmed. And she said, "You have so much stuff on your calendar." But then when I started to drill down to it, I was somewhat relieved to see that some of these things were like exercise. Some of these things were lunch. And I said, yes, absolutely. If I don't block it out, first of all, one of you is going to schedule it. Or number 2, I'm going to forget. I mean, I can get into the flow and kind of forget to move or forget to eat. And so I want to make sure that, as much as that might be overwhelming for other people, that I actually do schedule some of these things into my calendar. So I guess that's not really a typical day, but that's a description of how I spend my life.
I love that, because it really shows you how routine sets you free. It's not restrictive at all. It can actually free up a lot of different things for you, like you just showed. And I think that's really great. So are there any other tips and tricks you have for using your calendar? It sounds like there's a lot of stuff on there, but are there also particular strategies you use? Do you have like different types of calendars? Is it color coded? Like, how do you use it?
I have a lot of different kinds of calendars, and each one of them has a special color assigned to them, not necessarily because it means anything, but because I like the color scheme and I know which calendars are going to show up more on my calendar, and that's my favorite color. So the one that shows up a lot is my favorite color, and then the other ones just kind of fit in. One of the things that I like to do is I have my main calendar, and then I have a home calendar. And then I also have some of my key colleagues, like my business partner. I have his calendar on my schedule so that I can see what he's doing. And then so that when we need to meet, I don't necessarily have to call him or text him or whatever saying, "Hey, are you available to meet such and such time?" I can just see it on his calendar. And then the other thing that I have that's on my calendar is my travel schedule. And I try to, as soon as I put my travel schedule onto my calendar, I build in buffer around it. And one of the things that I have picked up over the last couple of years, actually, is the whole concept of using the emojis in the calendar. Because one of the things I was having difficulty with is, because other people have access to my calendar, they would see things that didn't look like quote unquote real appointments, and they would schedule over them. So if it was an appointment with myself to work on a particular project and they saw a 2-hour block on my calendar, they'd say, "Oh, well, that's not with another person. That's just Alice. So I'm going to schedule over that." And that was happening a lot. And so I ended up having a conversation with the couple of people who do actively schedule my calendar. And I said, if I put a little stop sign emoji in front of that, that cannot be moved. You can't schedule over that particular calendar appointment. Obviously, if it's scheduled with somebody else, you also can't move that unless you check with me first. And then the other thing that I had to tell them, particularly during this whole Zoomiverse world that we're in, is if I have a Zoom meeting scheduled, please give me at least 15 minutes buffer. So before and after, I want at least 15 minutes. Because 1, I don't know if the meeting's going to end on time. And 2, even though you can go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, it's exhausting. It's so incredibly draining. And I just need a little bit of regroup time even if it's just frankly to take a bio break. And once we had that discussion via Slack, I thought that it's been working much better.
I love that. I think emojis has been like a new thing in 2020, if not 2021. And we've been kind of mentioning it on the podcast every now and then in some of the live masterclasses of the Productivity Academy. So if you're new to this, you're like, what is Alice talking about? It's just a really simple idea that you can use an emoji to kind of start off the calendar description. So for example, the way I use it is anytime I'm doing a podcast and it has like video enabled, I'll start with a video camera emoji in the calendar title. So I know, oh, this is a video podcast. But if it's going to be audio only, then it has like a music note on there. So I just know it's just going to be audio only. So I don't have to, wear a dress shirt or something like that, right? So it's just really helpful for like minutiae things like that. Or if you, for example, have date night with your partner, you could put like a heart emoji there. So you can kind of know like, oh, this is what's happening on Saturday or something like that, right? Like you can get really creative with it. And I found that for me, it replaced the color coding system because now I can just use emojis for the most part. And I know you've hired an executive assistant in the past, something that we've definitely encouraged many people to do. And it sounds like you've been able to train this person up and be able to manage your calendar, and it sounds like more things as well. How has that experience been?
Well, I remember referring back to the Productivity Show episode that you did with Charles No about executive assistants. And I really took a lot from that particular podcast to really define what her scope is. And I remembered very distinctly when we decided to pull the trigger on hiring an executive assistant. It was something I'd been thinking about for quite a while. But the situation that made this happen was that my business partner, Jim Anderson, had been headhunted for a position at Greenpeace East Asia. And he told me about it. And he kept saying, but I don't think I'm the guy. And I kept saying, first of all, I'm really annoyed that you're interviewing for a job. And I will be more annoyed if you sandbag this. You better go in there wanting to get this job because you can get this job. And he's like, no, I'm not the guy. And then he ended up being selected as a finalist for this position and was going to be flown to Hong Kong for an interview. And they were going to make the travel arrangements. And I said, this is awesome. Congratulations. Now go to Hong Kong and kill this interview. And about 24 hours later, they emailed him and said, yeah, so we're having trouble working out the logistics of your travel. So can you work out your own travel? To which he said, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. Let me call Alice. And so not only was my business partner about to go off as a finalist for an interview in Hong Kong, but he asked me to arrange all of his travel. So I literally dropped everything that day and spent at least half the day arranging his travel to fly to Hong Kong 3 days from that day, and arranging his hotel and his transportation and all this stuff. And I handed him his itinerary and says, the next thing I'm going to do after I hand you this itinerary is post a job for an executive assistant. So I did. And one of the main things that this position was going to be responsible for at the beginning was travel arrangements. And I ended up going through Upwork initially and had a whole bunch of different candidates. And Amanda Butterworth, who is our executive assistant, quickly, like almost immediately, became the candidate to beat. And when we brought her on, we gave her a protocol of okay, here's the definition of done, which I also learned from the Productivity Academy. But here's the definition of done of what a successful travel booking looks like. So here's our preferences, here's the airline, here's the hotel preferences, here's this, that, and the other thing. And obviously it has evolved over the years. She's now been with us, I think, 4 years, almost 4 years. And so we started with Upwork, but then we quickly brought her in-house and said, yeah, we love you, we want to keep you, and you're doing a great job. So I think the things that have been helpful in having a successful relationship with our executive assistant is that we did give her a protocol of here's what we think is success. And here are the things that we want you to do that are very discreet. And here's how the steps that we would like you to go through. The transition during the pandemic, however, was that I went from traveling over 200 days a year to, I think in 2020, I traveled 36 days. That's a pretty significant change. And that's not what we needed to do for her to do anymore, is that obviously when you're not traveling, you don't need someone to make your travel arrangements. However, what ended up happening is that we quickly shifted her over into scheduling online presentations because we were getting all sorts of inquiries to do presentations, webinars, podcasts, you name it. And we wanted someone to handle the logistics. And so in many respects, dealing with the logistics of scheduling online meetings and presentations was not all that different from the logistics of handling travel. So she shifted into that role. And now she does kind of a hybrid, which I guess a lot of things have shifted to the hybrid world, where when we do have travel, she makes the travel arrangements. And when we do have presentations online, she still handles that. And now more and more, she's also handling other things that you would expect an executive assistant to handle, like scheduling meetings and appointments and that sort of thing. But she's been a godsend.
Wow, that's really powerful. And I think what you really showed there is it takes a good leader to be able to delegate and get the leverage and results that they're looking for. A lot of people oftentimes think that, oh, I'm just going to hire someone and then it magically is going to happen. And I'm going to have all this free time and this person is just going to be magical. It doesn't quite work like that. The person that is delegating, oftentimes you or I or the person listening here, has to know, one, what's the vision here and can I communicate that? Two, can I set this person up for success? Like that's a really big idea here. It's just, can I set this person up for success? Like what does this person need to be successful at this? And then third thing, like you said, what's the definition of done? How does this person know what success looks like so that he or she, when they are working on that particular task that you gave to them, they can look at it and say, okay, this is up to the standard and requirements that it was asked of me, so that there are no surprises when it is done. Because the worst thing is if you ever delegated something and you're all excited and you said, hey, please go ahead and do this and give it to me back on Friday, and something comes back on Friday and it's like completely different what you asked for. I think we've all been in that boat where it's very frustrating, and it's because we probably didn't do a good job delegating. It's not the person's fault. It's really our fault.
I think that's one thing that I've really had to work on over the last several years, because as our team has grown, I've joked with the team that previously we were a mom and pop operation. It was myself and Jim. And then as we've added people, associates to the team, we have maintained for many years that mom and pop attitude, because it's still a pretty small team, but we're so spread out and we're across multiple time zones that over the last several years, we've just had to become much more explicit about how we delegate to other people. And I will say that I'm still working on this. There's a couple people recently that I delegated things to that I know it must have been frustrating for them to see, okay, I gave her this product and then here's the product that ended up coming out the other side. And that doesn't look anything like what I gave her. And I know that's frustrating because I've been on the receiving end of that as well. So I'm trying to focus a little bit more in on how can I define what I see or feel is successful in a way that someone else can understand. Because that's the other thing, is that moving from a mom and pop operation to something that is a larger entity, a larger team. When Jim and I first started working together, people who observed us working would tease us saying, you two know you share a brain, right? Because we would do things. He's totally my work spouse. We finish each other's sentences. We kind of know where the other person is on most things. And as we've expanded the team, we don't have that kind of situation anymore. And we shouldn't have that kind of situation anymore. So we've really had to think a lot more about that definition of done and how do we articulate it in a way that someone will understand.
Yeah, I think that's a big step forward for a lot of leaders here, is to be able to translate vision, essentially. Really, it's just what do we see? How do we envision things? And how do we translate that into either a written document that everyone can align around, or to a product or a task that needs to be done? Yeah, I totally see that and relate to that, because I've definitely been there myself. And one thing, Alice, I've always wanted to ask you is, because I know on Slack, as part of the Productivity Academy, you mentioned a few times that when you were traveling quite a bit back in the day, you always gave a lot of presentations, and you mentioned and referenced Asian efficiency. And now that everything is kind of like in the Zoom world, I'm assuming that is kind of a continuation of that. But I've always been curious, what do you talk about in those presentations in reference to AE?
Well, I will admit that I do even put up a picture of you guys, one of the headshots of you and Brooks, which is like, hey, it's Asian efficiency. And inevitably someone says, Brooks doesn't look Asian. I said, yeah, but he's Asian adjacent. And the thing that we talk about with Asian efficiency is the T framework. And this is something that particularly for nonprofit professionals, when you work in the nonprofit sector, first of all, I think those that don't work in the nonprofit sector think that people who work in nonprofit are doing it totally out of passion. And while the people who end up staying in the nonprofit sector typically do have a great deal of caring and passion for the causes that they're working for, it's also a profession. And it's also something that we have to feel like we're rewarded for. So when we're talking about Asian efficiency, it's usually myself and Chad Barger, who is, as we joke, he's my productivity brother. And his company is Productive Fundraising. So he even has productive in his name. And we talk about the T framework because very often nonprofit professionals feel completely overwhelmed, because not only are they in many respects undercompensated, but they're also expected to do a lot of things, and a lot of things that aren't necessarily part of their job description. It's just the nature of the nonprofit sector. And I'm not saying it's right, but it has been what people do in nonprofits. And when they're trying to get things done, they are constantly looking all over the place. It's like, oh, look, shiny thing, shiny thing, shiny thing, shiny thing, fire, squirrel, you name it. And they're constantly going back and forth on things. And so when I do presentations, sometimes with Chad, sometimes solo, about productivity in the fundraising sector, we do go back to the T framework with time, energy, and attention. And almost everyone drills down, like a lot of people who are first getting into productivity, they focus on time. They're like, I don't have enough time to do everything. It's like, okay, well, then here are some tips that you can use, some from Asian efficiency, some from other products that we've used, some from just stuff that we've discovered works for us. Here are things that you can do to improve your time management. And then we also help people a little bit with the energy and attention piece. But for the most part, we spend most of our time helping nonprofit professionals focus more on time management, because there are a lot of squirrels in the nonprofit sector that can distract you. And while that is an attention issue, more often they're starting with thinking that they don't have enough time. The other thing that we have used a lot, and this is something that I have been really passionate about, is in a presentation that I do about planning for fundraising and strategic planning for nonprofits, I talk about the 12-week year. And the thing about the 12-week year that is in many respects revolutionary for a lot of nonprofit organizations is that they have been drilled into this idea of we have to do a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. And then inevitably that strategic plan gets put on a shelf and nobody looks at it until the next time somebody says, we have to do a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. And the thing that, since our organization works with a lot of small teams, they don't have time for all of the fluffy stuff. They don't have time for stuff that's not actionable. So I've taken the 12-week year model that I have learned both from reading Brian Moran's book, but also from the Productivity Academy, and translated that into how do you develop a fundraising plan or a strategic plan for a nonprofit organization. So we do look at, here's the big horizon vision, but then here's what we're going to do in the next 12 weeks. And the main thing that I emphasize with nonprofits, because they do tend to be under-resourced when it comes to people, is I said, we're going to focus on strategic imbalance. We're going to focus on the fact that for this next 12 weeks, you can't get it all done. It is impossible for you to get it all done. So let's focus on no more than 3 priorities over the next 12 weeks that you think you can make significant progress on. So if that means we're going to focus on this fundraising initiative and this fundraising initiative and this project, that's what you're going to focus on. And the fact that this really important project that you need to do this year is not on this 12 weeks is okay, because we will reset after 12 weeks and then we will start looking at some of those other things. And in fact, earlier this week, I had a monthly check-in call with one of those teams that is using the 12-week year for their fundraising plan for this fiscal year. And we did the recap of last quarter. What did we do? Great, we finished that stuff. Here's what's coming up this quarter. They've had a change in personnel, so they're down 1 person right now. So what on this 12-week plan can we take away? And we very strategically and intentionally took a few things off of this 12-week year to say that's going into the next 12-week year, because here are the things that we can focus on with the people that we have. So those are the ways that I've used resources from Asian efficiency within my work as a consultant.
Wow. So not only are you raising money for organizations and helping them, but also helping them become more productive as well.
I'm trying.
You're like an extension of AE, just doing it out there. I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that, and also just sharing the wealth with other people in that way, because I think so many people can benefit from this. And I don't think we even nearly focus enough on the nonprofit sector. So I'm really glad that you're able to pass it on to people in that sector, because it sounds like they really need it.
Definitely. I'm trying to evangelize.
Well, Alice, before we wrap it up here, I also did some digging on you, and I noticed as you were traveling quite a bit, I know you're a big foodie, and you even have a website with restaurant recommendations from all your travels. I would love to hear how you came up about creating that list, but also just general fun travel tips or hacks that you might have.
I love traveling, and I will admit that after things shut down in 2020, the first month was okay. But after the first month, it's like, I miss going out and doing things. And yes, restaurants are my major weakness. And I check all sorts of different weirdo lists to be able to decide, oh, where am I going to eat? And that's one of the first things that I plan when I start planning a new trip is what are the things that I absolutely have to eat when I go to this community? And the things that I like are, I want restaurants and food experiences that reflect the culture of the community. So it's not even necessarily that it's the highest end or the best rated or the most expensive restaurant. It's what says something about the culture of this community. So for instance, I travel regularly to Yuma, Arizona, which is in the southwest corner of Arizona, 5 minutes from California, 15 minutes from Mexico. And if you go to Yuma, one of the things that you pretty much have to eat are tacos. And if you aren't into tacos, that's okay. We have burritos too. And it's not expensive food. It's just really genuinely good food if you go to the right places. And so I'm not going to the chains. I'm not going to the places that seem to be not being true to being authentic. The places that I'm going are in Yuma, kind of holes in the wall, frankly. And then there's other communities where, yeah, I'm going to go to that really high-end restaurant because it's going to be awesome. In fact, one of the restaurants that I kind of mourn is Gagan in Bangkok, which intentionally closed in 2020. But I went there twice, and both times it was a different experience, and both times it was absolutely amazing. But again, it's a place that really, I guess in many respects, just didn't take itself too seriously. Because I've also gone to a couple restaurants that shall go unnamed that were really pretentious and really seemed to think, we're really important. Do you know how many stars we have? And those are not the experiences that I want. I want to have a place that feels authentic, but also feels lighthearted and feels like I am giving you hospitality in the true sense of hospitality. And now you're egging me on to actually update my restaurant blog, because I haven't actually updated it in a long time. And so maybe that'll be one of my little side projects over the next 12 weeks.
Something I've actually never talked about on the podcast is, or even in courses, I think, or even on the blog, is I disproportionately spend a crazy amount of money on food experiences. And it's something people don't really know about me. But yeah, I've been to Gagan, I want to say 3 times. Now, part of it is because I lived in Bangkok for a year. Actually, the first year that Asian Efficiency started, I lived in Bangkok at that time. So this is 2011. So about a decade ago now. And for those who don't know, it's an Indian restaurant, if I remember correctly. And I remember going at the time, and it was labeled like one of the top 25 restaurants in the world or top 10 in Asia. And I remember going and I go, wow, like this is really good food. And coming back 2 months later, like no big deal, eating there again. And I saw that Alinea was on your list as well.
Yes, I loved Alinea. And I think that one of their signature items at Alinea in Chicago is the candy apple balloon, which is a taffy that has been literally blown up with helium, and they present it to you as a balloon, and you are supposed to bite it and, of course, inhale the helium and then just completely crack up for the next 5 or 10 minutes because everyone's starting like this. And that's another one of those places that, yes, the entire experience was amazing and it was worth every penny. Now, another one that it was kind of my worth every penny moment was actually recently. This was in just a few months ago in New York City. I went to Le Bernardin, which is a classic French restaurant. And Eric Repair is the executive chef. And it was incredible. But it wasn't, it wasn't the, we're going to be goofy and all sorts of things. It was incredibly classic and elegant and well executed, but the staff didn't seem full of themselves. The staff really seemed genuinely focused on, we want to make sure this person has a good time. And I really appreciate people who genuinely seem to want to do what they're doing. And I think that's one of the things that just in general, I try to surround myself with people who like doing what they're doing and want to share that with the world.
Before we wrap it up here, I want to give you one restaurant recommendation that I think you will really enjoy that most people don't know about. And it's called Eculent, Eculent. It's maybe 45 minutes outside of Houston, Texas. And it's probably one of the most memorable food experiences I've had in my life. And it's very hard to get into. But I was very fortunate to be able to get in on my birthday last year. So I won't spoil it too much, but I would highly recommend you check that out. That's all I will say. But if you do your own research, I think you will be even more excited to go when you have an opportunity to do so.
Awesome. It's on my
Alice,
list.
I really enjoyed our podcast here today. I'm kind of curious to hear from you. What's next? If people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
Well, I am still doing presentations, mostly via Zoom and online right now, but I do have my first, I think, 2 in-person presentations scheduled for this year. So that's really exciting. And if you go to goalbusters.net, that's GOAL, like achieving a goal, busters.net. There's a schedule of our presentations. There's also links to all of our social media, and I would love to connect with fellow productivity nerds.
Awesome. We'll have links to all of that here in the show notes, so don't worry if you missed something there. I really enjoyed this. Thank you, Alice, for being here today. And for everyone listening, hope you enjoyed it as well. And we'll see you next Productive Monday.